Good evening. Once again, it's great to be with you tonight. We're going to do a lesson I've kind of had in my head for a little while, but had to kind of think through and put together before I be ready to present it. And a lot of this is going to be framed around Proverbs 31, a passage where many of us are probably very familiar with. So if you'd like to turn there, we're going to spend some time there for a little while tonight. We'll also be looking at a couple of passages on a somewhat related discussion that I think kind of underlies some of what's going on in Proverbs 31. And then I want to look at an example of Proverbs 31 that we see in the New Testament before we make some application and close tonight. So first, Proverbs 31, the very famous passage here is, of course, about the woman worthy of being praised. The wife of noble character here, I want to read through this passage, and then we'll come back and look at some of the characteristics that we see described there. So let's start in verse 10, and let's read through the end of the chapter. Proverbs 31, verse 10. A wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She's like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night, and she provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand, she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed, and she is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. A really good passage and describing all the wonderful things that this woman is doing. I'm going to put the list up here, but we're going to go through these and kind of touch on some of these characteristics that we see. Yeah, sorry. And if it is very hard to see. Let me see if I can. Those are not doing anything. I was trying to be clever here and put a purple background for for the Proverbs 31, but I think it may be backfiring on me a little bit. I should have done scarlet, but we'll see the connection in a little while later in the example we're going to do later. But I'll be reading through these, and if you'd like the slides, I'd be happy to send them to anyone later. But the Proverbs 31 woman here, the first thing that we see in verse 11 is that she's trustworthy. Her husband has full confidence in her. He lacks nothing of value because of her. We also see consistently throughout that this woman has a very strong work ethic. She is not afraid to do work with her hands. We see it in verse 15. She gets up while it is still night to provide food for her family and make portions for her female servants. We see in verse 17, she sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. In verse 25, she's clothed with strength and dignity. We see also pretty consistently throughout that this is a businesswoman. This is an industrious woman who is going out and she is doing a lot of things to make money for her household. In verse 13, she's selecting wool and flax, working it there with eager hands. And we're told pretty specifically later in verse 24, she's making these linen garments to sell, to supply the merchants. We see her, she's bringing food from afar in verse 14. She's providing food in 15. Verse 16, she's considering a field, buying it out of her earnings, going out and planting a vineyard. So she's doing this, she's making this money and then investing it even further to make more money. We see continuing on in 17, setting about her work vigorously. In 18, her trading is profitable. Her lamp, it does not go out at night, meaning it's full of oil, which would have been very expensive at the time. And in verse 19, we see her spinning again the garments that she would sell in the marketplace. So this woman is working very hard, doing a lot of different jobs and making a lot of money, doing very well, very successfully with these things. We also see her providing the best for her family. In verse 11 and 12, her husband lacks nothing. Verse 12, she brings him good and not harm all the days of her life. In verse 21 and 22, when it snows, she has no fear for her household. All of them are clothed in scarlet, that I should have made the background so you could see what's on the board. And in verse 22, her coverings for her bed, all of her, she has coverings for her bed. She's clothed in fine linen and purple. The purple garments, again, the scarlet and the purple would have been very expensive cloth because of the dye used to make them. So she's not stopping short. She's making all this money. She's putting it into her family. She's providing for them, for the people around her. But that extends not just to them. It also extends to the poor and the needy. In verse 20, she opens her arms to the poor, extends her hands to the needy. And then 21 and 22 kind of describes how she is, again, providing for her family. All of her characteristics, we're told in verse 23, bring honor to her family. So because of all of the ways that she is described, it says in verse 23, her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. Told a couple of other things here. Verse 30, I think, kind of sums up all of these. She fears the Lord. This woman fears the Lord. Verse 26 and 27, we are told that she speaks with wisdom. Faithful instruction is on her tongue, so she's instructing the people around her about, I think, presumably, about God. Verse 27, she's watching over the affairs of her household. She's paying attention, and she's very discerning about what's going on there. And again, not doing it just from time to time. She does not eat the bread of idleness. She's looking over these things constantly. So in verse 28 through 31, we're told that she is praised for all of these things. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, beauty's fleeting. A woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. A woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. So I think, we learn a lot about this woman. She is doing all kinds of stuff. She's got her hands all over the place, and she's doing things very well. Not only in business where she's making money, but also in her household where she's taking care of her family. Also with the people around her in the community. Her family is respected because of her character, because of her diligence. So she's doing all these things, and the most important thing we see is that she is faithful to the Lord. She fears the Lord, and all of that is underlying everything she's doing in her life, in her business, in her family and household. So the Proverbs 31 woman, I think we see just a really complete picture of a person. This is what we really should all aspire to be. We're going to come back to that idea later, how we can apply this not just to women, not just to mothers, not just to wives, but to all of us, really. But I want to talk about kind of a side discussion here that I think is really interesting when you consider everything she's doing here, and that is the idea of submission. I think that at times today it is used in a way that I really don't think it is meant in the Bible, and I think we can really see that in Proverbs 31. The idea of submission is is not something that we are really supposed to take and adapt to what our culture, what we want it to be, but it really is something that fits exactly with Proverbs 31. So I want to look at Ephesians 5 and look at the idea of submission in the husband and wife relationship. Consider how Proverbs 31 still fits that very well. Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians 5, verse 21. And again, we'll read to the end of the chapter here, although we could keep reading because this is part of a much longer passage about submission. 5:21, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. All right, so this passage very clearly sets up an authority relationship. The husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. We're also told that the husband is to respect the wife. So the wife submits to the husband's authority, and the husband loves the wife in return. We see that there very clearly in Ephesians 5:21. I think that if we talk about some interpretations of this submission, some people would take this too far, I think, and say that, well, she submits in all things, so the husband makes all the decisions, and the wife needs to just follow along and do everything he says. That's not really what's conveyed here. And I think we can learn that in Proverbs 31. Proverbs 31, we look at, she is the provider of the family. She is going out and making a lot of money. Like her pursuits are not just small things. They're not side jobs. I've heard someone talk about Proverbs 31, and when it says that she bought a field and planted a vineyard out of her earnings, they said, oh, she was a gardener. That's not really the connotation there. A field where you're planting a vineyard would have been very expensive. And it says it was her earnings that purchased that. So the idea here is she is providing for the family. She is the breadwinner in that passage. So she's making business deals without really, it says without consulting. She's considering buying it on her own. And he's stepping back and letting her do that. He's letting her do those things in the household. So how does this household fit in with what we just read in Ephesians 5? If she is submitting to his authority, how does that work in context? I want to talk about another submissive authority relationship that I think can help give us a picture for how this makes sense. And that is elders and church members. I think that this is a very analogous relationship in a lot of ways. So let's turn to 1 Timothy chapter 3. We're going to look at a couple of shorter passages here to make some of these points. 1 Timothy chapter 3. Let's start in verse 2. We're only going to look at a portion of this, but I want to read most of this passage here in its context. Verse 2, and we'll read through verse 7. Now the overseer, or the elder, is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. So we see here in the qualifications of elders that one of the qualifications is that he is able to control his own household, that his household is faithful, that he's providing them the leadership that allows them to be faithful to God. He's bringing them down that path. So in his leadership within his family, they are faithful to God. That is one of the ways that you know that this man can be successful in leading the church. His family is faithful, so ideally the church will be faithful. So there's some similarities there in the elder qualifications. But specifically what we see that they are told to do, the elders are told to do, and then the members are told to do, we see in 1 Peter chapter 5. Partially in 1 Peter 5. We're going to see it again repeated in another passage. But 1 Peter chapter 5. Verse 2. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be, not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. So the elders are told there that you are supposed to not lord it over them, but care for them. Make sure you're looking out for them. So you're supposed to love them sacrificially, which is exactly what was told to husbands. It says, don't abuse your authority to your wife, but love her, cherish her. Make sure that you're looking out for her. Make sure that you are taking care of her. That is exactly what is charged to the elders as well. In verse 5, in the same way, you who are younger, submit yourselves to the elders, and all of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another. So the young members, the people who are under the elders, is the idea there, the flock, is told to submit to the leadership and the authority of the elders, knowing that they are leading you. They are ultimately looking out for your soul. They are caring for you. So I think we see the same dynamic of submission to authority and authority not lording it over, but caring for the other party. And I think we see the point of it in Hebrews chapter 13. The point of it. And I think this is where we really understand this relationship. Hebrews chapter 13. Verse 17, have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority, because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. Do this so that their work will be a joy and not a burden, for that would be of no benefit to you. So again, we see the idea of submitting to their authority here, but we also see the point of this. What is the point of the elders? Not just to lead, but also to give an account. They are responsible for the souls of the church. They are held accountable to God for the souls that are in their charge. I think that's the same idea. That's the reason that anyone is put in a position of authority, not just to provide leadership, but ultimately to be held accountable. So applying that to husbands and wives, husbands are to be the head of the wife and the household, to provide leadership, but also to be held accountable. That is the point of the authority relationship, to be held accountable to God for the souls in the charge. So then we think about Ephesians chapter 5. You can turn there if you'd like. I'm not going to reference any specific verse, but I will talk generally about the passage. They are told to submit to the authority of the husbands, and the husbands to love their wives sacrificially as Christ does, ultimately because they are going to be accountable to God for their wives, for their household, for those in their care. So we think back to the way some people frame it is, well, the husband makes all the decisions. Because he's in the position of authority and leadership, he's just going to decide everything that the family's going to do. No, that doesn't make sense. There will be plenty of times where the wife is not with him, the children are not with him, the husband can't decide everything for them. So his leadership has to be more than just making decisions. It's got to be principles. And that's where we get back to the idea of accountability. He is trying to provide leadership for them, to provide them a path, make sure that they are on the right path to be saved. And that's another way that we can kind of twist that in different societies, not just ours. Plenty of societies throughout time have done this, but twist it where we try to define a very clear role. Well, husbands look like this, and wives look like this. I don't think that is what the passage is describing. What it's really describing is a relationship where both of them are submitting to each other. You go back to Ephesians chapter 5, that passage starts with verse 21, submit to each other. Submit to one another in Christ. And then it describes how everyone submits to each other. The wife submits by submitting. The husband submits to the wife by leading her and being accountable for her soul. And then you go and each one of the other examples there show a position of authority, of leadership, where one is submitting to the authority of the other, but really both of them are just submitting to each other. The passage in Ephesians 5 is framed in that way, that each person is submitting to the other. So we get back to Proverbs 31. Well, how is this woman submitting to her husband's leadership? Well, her husband, as a wise leader, as someone who is caring for his family, making sure that they are staying on the path, looks at his wife and says, she's doing everything she needs to be doing. She is faithful to the Lord. She is fearing the Lord. And if while she's doing that, she wants to go out and make a great business deal and make sure that she's taking care of the family, that she's putting food on the table, and I don't have to do that, that's not a responsibility I have to do because maybe she's better suited to that than I am, that's okay. Because what matters? Her soul is safe. She is faithful to the Lord. And then what does that free him up to do? Back in Proverbs 31, where is he going? He's sitting in the city gate with the other leaders of the community. He doesn't have to worry about his household because he trusts his wife and knows that it is safe. Now, in his position of leadership, he should be checking in, and I'm sure he is, making sure that his wife, his children, those in the household are on paths that lead to God. But they are. They are faithful. So he's free to not only provide that leadership to his household, but also to help others, to go out and provide his leadership and wisdom to other people in their community. So Proverbs 31 presents, I think, a little bit different picture of this submission than we see in different ways. But I also want to talk about an example of Proverbs 31, this woman who is to be praised. Where do we see her? I think in Acts 16. Acts chapter 16. We're going to talk about Lydia here for just a few moments. A very small character, not mentioned very much, but I think very powerful. A very powerful, wise person. In verse 13, we have Paul on his journey here. And on the Sabbath, we went outside the city gate to the river, where we expected to find a place of prayer. And we sat down and began to speak to the women who had gathered there. One of those listening was a woman from the city of Thyatira named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth. She was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. When she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to her home. "If you consider me a believer in the Lord," she said, "come and stay at my house." And she persuaded us. So just a couple of verses here about Lydia, but we see so much, and we see a lot of parallels. So the first thing is, she was trustworthy. People trusted her. And we know that because Paul trusted her pretty quickly. In verse 15, after she's baptized, she's inviting them over, and she's saying, "Come and stay at my house." She's just met them, and they go and stay at her house for a few days. She is worthy of trust. We see her listening to Paul and his companions in verse 13. We also see that she is a businesswoman, just like the woman in Proverbs 31. She's a seller of purple cloth. And this is the one that always makes this connection for me. What was the woman in Proverbs 31 doing? She was making and selling fine linen garments and purple. And then here, what is Lydia doing? She's selling purple cloth. pointing out there, and this is typically pointed out here, but it was still a very fine fabric. It still would have been very expensive. So she probably did very well for herself. We see she has a household. She probably had servants in her household. She probably had a lot of people there that she was taking care of. She probably did very well and was fairly wealthy. But the idea here of purple, just like the woman in Proverbs 31, she was dealing with the best. She was working with the best. But while doing that, she was also caring for the needy. So here she has brethren in need who are coming, preaching the word. She responds, she's baptized, obeys the gospel. And then what does she do for them? Does she say, all right, well, y'all go on your way? She invites them into her home. Come and stay with me for a few days, because she knows that they're traveling through. She knows they have nowhere else to go. What does her character do? It brings honor to all of her household. So we're told that not only she is baptized, in verse 15, when she and the members of her household were baptized. I want to back up just a little bit to verse 13. She's going to this place by the river. So Paul and his companions go to this place by the river because they expect to find a place of prayer. I think the idea, they want to go try to convert people. They were really looking for these opportunities. They knew that would be a good place to go. And who is there praying? Lydia. So because of her character, she's wanting to go and pray to the Lord with these other people worshiping God. She's willing to listen. She's willing to take them into her home. What does that bring to all of her household? Honor and glory in the best form possible in their salvation. And then in verse 13 and 14, we also see that this woman feared the Lord. She was faithful to God. Even before she had heard the gospel and responded, she had not become a Christian, but she was a worshiper of God, it tells us in verse 14. She's going there and praying. She's looking for this truth. She's looking for this opportunity. And when she finds it, she takes hold of it. So Lydia is a faithful woman who fears the Lord. I think she is the picture of the Proverbs 31 woman that we see. So we've seen these different passages. I want to close with some application. We're going to come back and reference some of these things as we go. I think the first one, as we consider the discussion that we had about submission, I think we need to remember to not put our own cultural view on the scripture. This is a really hard thing to do. I think this is really impossible for you to do on your own, and that's why it's important to talk to different people, to look for different people who are wise, people who know what they're talking about, and look for opportunities for them to teach you and for you to teach them things that you understand about the scriptures. But this is something that we should always be doing. God's law is truth, but there are times where we can bring in our own biases, our own worldview that kind of distorts that. We need to be careful not to do that because God's truth is perfect. The other one here we talked about is the idea of submission. Go all the way back to Ephesians 5:21, submit to each other. We are all to submit to one another. There are different relationships we're going to be in. There are times we're going to be in positions of authority over people. They're going to be in positions of authority over us. In any of those relationships that we have, we are still to submit to other people. They can have authority over us. They can provide us leadership, and we're submitting to that leadership and authority and understanding that God put them in that position. Or maybe we're in that position. We're providing leadership to someone. We're trying to lead them down a path. We still need to submit to the other person. Understand that we should be looking out for their needs. We should be providing them with leadership that leads them down the right paths, that leads them to God. We talked about how the Proverbs 31 woman submits to her husband by serving him, by ensuring that him and his family were provided for, and while also following her husband's leadership. He was clearly leading them to spiritual paths because that's where she was going. And it allowed him to lead not only her house, but also the community. We also see him submitting to his wife by loving her. We see the way that him and his children praise her. They love her. They love her for all that she does for them, all that she is bringing to them, by ensuring that her and all the household are faithful to God, and by taking a step back and allowing her to do things that she is good at, things that she will be successful in God has blessed her with those abilities, those understanding in those arenas, so that she can provide for the family and allows him to provide his leadership to others as well. So we're all called to submit, regardless of the position we're in. And that is ultimately what being a servant or a servant leader is about, is submission to others. And I think finally is the idea that Proverbs 31 is not just about one specific role. It's not about checking off a list. These are the things we need to do. There's one thing that matters in Proverbs 31. But you think back through what she is. She's a wife. She's a mother. She's a breadwinner. She's a provider for her family. She's a great businesswoman. We can be all those things. Those are good things. We can be some of those things or none of those things, and that's okay too. What is she at the end? She fears the Lord. She is faithful to the Lord. That is what matters in Proverbs 31. You think back through, you may be a wife. You may not be. In either position, that's okay. You can still be faithful to the Lord and be a Proverbs 31 woman. Or men, you may be a father. You may not be a father, by choice or otherwise. That's okay. Both of those things are okay. But what matters? Neither of those things, but whether you fear the Lord and are faithful to the Lord. Same for any of the characteristics that she holds. She's a businesswoman, but is that what matters? No, it's what she's doing with that. It's not that she is a businesswoman, it's that she's doing it as unto the Lord because she's faithful to the Lord. You may not work, and that's great, that's fine. You don't have to work, you don't have to have a job and go out and earn all this money like she does for your family to be a Proverbs 31 woman. You can do a lot of things outside of that and still be faithful to the Lord and submit to others and serve others. So all these characteristics, I think sometimes we try to define, we try to set on people that you need to do this, and this is how, like everything that you're going to do. There's not one defined path that is going to lead us to God. There is one important thing though, whether or not we fear the Lord and are faithful to the Lord. And that is what makes any of us the woman from Proverbs 31. And that is what we really should be striving to be. We should all strive to be like the woman in Proverbs 31. So let's think about these things. Let's examine our own role. We find ourselves in all kinds of different stations. Ultimately, it doesn't matter where we are. We can try to change that. We can be happy with where we are. But what matters is, what am I doing with where I'm at? I find myself in a certain position in this role. I have this job, or, I am a spouse. Maybe I have kids or I don't. What am I doing with those things? Am I doing those things as I am doing them unto the Lord? Am I trying to provide for my family? Am I trying to serve them and help them out and do everything that I can for them, provide them leadership and pathways? But ultimately, am I serving the Lord? Am I faithful to the Lord? Let's think about these things, ask ourselves these questions, and if anyone needs to make any changes in their life, as always, we have the opportunity to do so. Come forward as we stand and sing this song.